I should probably mute.
Well, right as I open up the audio, you say that. Gotta love the professionalism on this intro, guys.
Always.
But as you can see, we have started, and we are short 2 crew members today. And one I was potentially aware of, Geo Streber, wasn't positive if he was going to be available for this month's episode or not. He was going to let me know, but, things probably got in the way and he probably forgot. But as for our resident investigator, Mr. Furball, I should give him a break because of how much international travel he's been doing recently. But should I? No, Blake, you should have fucking remembered. And it's not like I tried harassing him on Discord about half a dozen times before we actually went live to make sure he was awake, but you know what? Oh well.
Well, I was going to say, we have somebody here that we can give crap for this because Furball's obviously made that show a priority over us. Turquoise Laura is in the chat, and she's part of the shills.
This is true. We could give her a bit of the hard time that we can give Logical Troglodyte because, yeah, apparently they decided to poach one of our panel members today. And who knows, maybe that's what made him forget that this was even going on, despite having a group chat about it, Blake. I kind of feel like Kirk, in a way, from what was that, Star Trek 3 talking to McCoy. This is what happens when you miss staff meetings.
Yes.
Oh, yes, when they're breaking him out of prison. Oh, Sulu's great line to the big guy. Don't call me tiny.
It's always the little guys you gotta watch out for because you never know just how squirrely they're gonna get.
When I was like
Squirrels,
12,
I think Squirrel's actually doing his stream too. He's giving me a hard time that we're doing this when he's doing his stream and he can never join.
Sorry, I had to pick a time slot that was going to be effective for both multiple people in the US and someone in Central Europe and another person in Korea. Yeah, it kind of limits the time frames that you can pick for a show like this.
Just a little bit.
But in the meantime, we do have a special guest with us this week. For those who cannot tell already, we have Progressive Liberal here.
Hey, everybody. You can just call me Ethan, too. That's usually easier.
Well, be honest, I have watched some of your stuff on your channel, and to be honest, the intro bits I tend to tune out on a little bit because a lot of people use such similar openings for just about every video that's like, opening 5 to 10 seconds of the video, they're going to talk about something not too important. Let's get into the meat of the video. And then I start paying attention.
Absolutely. I do the same thing. Don't worry about it.
So, you're a victim.
But anyway, hi, everybody. I'm Ethan.
Yeah.
No, I'm not Ethan Allen. Although that'd be kind of cool.
And kind of creepy because I live in New England where a lot of those names are very common around here. Just because that's the thing. It really is living history out in this area, which to me is the allure and one of the reasons why when I left active duty on the Navy and I could pretty much pick wherever I wanted, that was a bonus of coming out this way. Being a bit of a history file is like, yeah, I'll go back to where things all began in this country and also where the job market was looking to be the best at the time.
Right. I have a friend who's a history major, and he believes that Benedict Arnold's eventually becoming a traitor is Ethan Allen's fault, and he's got a whole theory about it.
You
That's
know,
interesting. I could see it.
yeah, I was going to say that I can definitely see that being a part of it because let's admit it, Benedict Arnold was kind of a victim of circumstances in that point because
Oh, sure.
dude was fucking kicking ass, but getting none of the credit and respect at the time.
No, absolutely not. Ethan Allen didn't even mention him in his report when he wrote back home. Didn't even bring his name up.
Yeah, major FU to the guy who really you would have lost if it wasn't for him in that battle.
Absolutely. Oh, and if Benedict Arnold had died instead of just getting shot in the leg at what's its face? I keep wanting to say Yorktown, not Yorktown. Fucking anyway, if he'd gotten shot in the heart, he would be one of the greatest American heroes of all time.
Yep.
Not sure where the quote originated from, but I know it's been used in the Nolan series of the Batman trilogy. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself be a villain.
Absolutely. In fact, when Benedict Arnold was injured, his assistant said, "Sir, are you hit?" And Benedict Arnold said, "It's my leg. I wish it had been my heart."
Yeah, at the time, he fucking knew it. And
Saratoga. Thank you, William.
Yeah.
Saratoga.
But, yeah. Another thing, some people wonder why, with my professional background being what it is in electrical engineering and touch of mechanical engineering now and application side of things, it's like, well, why the fascination with history? And there was one thing that the first time I heard it was one of my teachers in middle school. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Yep. Well, and as the great Mark Twain once said, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Just one of my favorite quotes.
Very true, especially because it very much is a cyclical nature to it, which kind of makes me worry about the landscape of what's ahead for this nation, especially if you look in history terms, the short term of the past 20 to 30 years, it ain't looking good.
You know, if you had told any of the founding framers that this nation still existed, what 240 years, 250 years after they came up with, well, 243, I guess, none of them would have believed you. I mean, that was what Thomas Jefferson was talking about in that one letter that's so famous where he said, you know, we need a revolution every 20 years. What he was saying was the only way that this nation stays alive is if we keep fighting for what we believe in. Every generation has to, and not necessarily militarily, just fighting for it. But no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but that is not the topic of the show, although we could end up having a show all on its own talking about things like that. Sure. which is not a bad thing, which actually reminds me, after this we are going to have to schedule that that show on your channel that we talked about in the live chat. What was that? Oh, last weekend?
It was last weekend, yeah. That's my fault. I just haven't gotten to you yet.
Oh no, it's both of us. Things have been crazy busy on my end too. Working 50 hours at work this past week and the week before, plus in school full time, which thankfully in the summer isn't truly full time like it was in the regular session, but yeah, full plate. And then I decided to move across the state on top of it.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So, but for those who didn't get to watch last night's episode of Veterans Talk Weekly yet, we already hinted at what today's discussion is gonna primarily be around. And I gotta say it, Gio is going to be kicking himself he's not a part of this one, because he and I have had a number of discussions about comparing the individual series in Trek canon, and about the one thing that he and I are in agreement on is Voyager had so much potential, but did so much disservice to itself.
So I talked about this recently on I had a live stream with X Cult Baby, if you guys know who she is. And she, for her 500 subscriber celebration, she did a Star Trek quiz. So the first half of the stream that I did with her, we just talked about Star Trek stuff. And she and I both, we're a similar age. I'm 35. And so Voyager came out like as I was becoming aware. Like I remember watching The Next Generation with my dad and my sister when I was little. And like I remember, you know, like watching the first episode of DS9 when it aired and everything, but I was little. Like when you're 10, 11, you can start like kind of more cognitively remembering things. And that's right when Voyager came out. So Voyager just has like this meaning for me that the other ones don't. And I think that's a big reason why it's my favorite. And I recognize, like, listen, Tom Paris is the merriest Sue of merriest Sues. Captain Janeway is basically schizophrenic.
You think?
B'Elanna Torres is like the worst engineer ever, but also a super fucking genius.
She's the bipolar of all the engineers in the Star Trek universe so far.
Like, there's this one time when she can't like reprogram a panel or something, and Janeway has to do it for her, and it's kind of glossed over in this one episode. It's early on. It's like the 4th or 5th episode. It's like, wait, didn't you just make her your chief engineer, and she literally like can't write like 4 lines of code? You know, Neelix. There are times that I love Neelix, and there are times when Neelix is awful. Tuvok is the greatest Vulcan ever, except Spock. Love Tuvok. And he was played perfectly by Tim Russ. Tim Russ knew how to play a fucking Vulcan.
Yeah, that is something that the 2 series that came up to discuss, I do have to give Voyager more credit in that aspect, because they stayed true to the nature of a number of the types of characters that have had a place in Star Trek since the beginning.
Right. Absolutely. And it's something that, if you want to get into this, we can, but it's a mistake that Discovery made in making their main character Vulcan influenced or something. And then I don't want to we can get into this if you want to, but like they start the series with somebody who's like, I have no emotions. I started a war, like me. And it's like, no, wait, what? I like Discovery. I'm not shitting on. I'm wearing a Discovery shirt right now while I talk to you.
You know, the top of the list of reasons why I really didn't enjoy and couldn't get behind Discovery is I saw what that era and what that portion in time in the Trek universe could be, and I saw how CBS fucked it over. And for those who don't know what I'm referring to the fan production Prelude to Axanar.
Yeah, no, Prelude to Axanar was it. I mean, like, it got my dick hard. I'm just gonna say amazing. My biggest problem with Discovery is when it was announced, I was like, I don't care about 10 years before Kirk. Like, I just don't care. I don't care what happened 10 years before Kirk. It was the same thing that I had with Enterprise, and the same problem I had with Trek 2009. Now, I like Enterprise and I like Trek 2009. I'm just talking about when I first heard about them. Like, I don't care. If you're going to give me a prequel, give me Enterprise B or Enterprise C. But don't give me like, hey, we're doing 10 years like at this one point. Why? I don't care.
Well, and that's where Discovery, with where in the timeline they said it was taking place, they had a lot of potential, because that's the time frame that Prelude to Axanar was looking at. It was looking at the 4 Years' War with the Klingons. The problem is CBS wanted to do a visual reboot a la the JJ verse style of things,
Right.
while saying, oh no, it'll fit perfectly into continuity leading right into TOS. And that's where they started fucking themselves.
No, where they
Pardon my
started
French.
figuring themselves is then they brought Alex Kurtzman into it, who doesn't know about something called logic and writes like a drunk 7-year-old who has heard about Star Trek before but doesn't actually know things about it. Like the second season, I guess we are getting to this. So the second season, like I was excited about the first half of it because it was like I felt like I was watching Star Trek episodes. Like I like that Star Trek's episodic. I don't mind arcs in Star Trek. Like I like that in DS9 where there's like an arc through the final few seasons.
But at the same time, it wasn't the primary thing the entire time. You still had that episodic nature, but you had a continuity. You had a flow in the background to it, which is actually one of my gripes with Voyager due to the situation they were in. Yeah. All right.
Yes. I'll get to that in 1 second. So, yes, William is correct. It was the guy who tried remaking MacGyver in Hawaii Five-0. Yes. So, that's fine. So,
this is your chief engineer. We have some issues.
No, he wasn't the...
Well,
Stamets wasn't the chief engineer. He was a scientist. He was part of the science division, not engineering.
The engineer of the spore drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and like, I even like the idea of the spore drive. I like that. Here's the thing about Discovery. It has a whole bunch of things that I like in it. Like, I like the idea of viewing when there was a war between the Klingons and the Federation. I like that idea. I like the idea of a spore drive that can go anywhere in the galaxy. Like, that's cool. I like all of the diversity in the cast. Like, I like, hey, let's see what happens with a gay couple in the future. I think that's an interesting thing. Like, let's go explore that. So they presented all these interesting things, and then they explored none of them. And instead, we're finding out about, like, Ash Tyler. I don't give a fuck about Ash Tyler. Like, I don't give a fuck. Stop putting him on screen. It's stupid. It's dumb. And I don't care that he's in love with Michael. Like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah, and Voden Toad out in the chat just put something else to it that really disappointed me. Here in the US, trying to make Discovery as the flagship program for CBS's version of Netflix and Hulu.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's... You needed to put more effort into your IP if you really wanted it to take off and have that hold. I understand that the majority of the Trek fandom is older. For that, let's just face it. We in the early and mid 30s, we are the youngins of the Trek fandom, of people who are typically where there are some of us who are our kids maybe getting it into it because of us and our care to it. And that's actually how I got into it. We'll get into that in a second, but I recognize that they needed to change things up in a way to refresh it, to try to pull in a new addition to the fan base.
Sure.
But in trying to do that, they looked at the existing fan base and pretty much gave them the finger. And this is coming from someone... So, my dad was an original Trekkie. He grew up... he was in middle school, high school when... high school. He was in high school when the original run of TOS was on broadcast TV. So come 20-ish years later, when I was born, already had that in the house. So my introduction to the series was actually even earlier than yours, I remember, because I had my dad had the VHS tapes of the movies as they were coming out, and that was my introduction. That's where, more so than the series, I cut my teeth on the original series crew movies. That was my introduction, which is where the even number movies are definitely the more watchable ones, but it's
They
also
are.
it's kind of sad because that really is it. It's like 2, 4, and 6, not in that order. And
Right.
if you want to go in order, 2, 6, 4 are my
Yes.
top 3 movies.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And it just from watchability, but also, and this is so I took a film course as an elective, and the end project, the end paper we had to do was pick a movie and really analyze it and break it down. My first submission for approval for a movie was Star Trek 6. And the professor is like, wait a minute, why? I mean, it's a Star Trek movie. It was why. It's like, oh no, this one was the end of an era. And it was written and done just after the official end of the Cold War. So you have that dynamic and that political interplay playing into the movie as well.
Sure.
And once I reminded that to him, he was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to have to go watch that now and keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So I just did it. You mentioned I just did a new Star Trek video. I'm doing a series called The Politics of Star Trek.
Yep.
And it's going to span, I have 6 seasons planned. So, this is the first 2 episodes of the first season. So I'm just talking about the Prime Directive right now, but I have like an overarching thing that I'm going towards. On the new video, Tony Designs left an amazing comment on the video about the Prime Directive. And I'm not going to get into it. It's like he wrote like paragraphs. It was fantastic. It's one of the best comments I've ever seen on YouTube. But he talked about how the Prime Directive its political implications, and about how it's the Magic Savages trope. And the Magic Savages trope is like what's in Avatar, like that, Native Americans or indigenous peoples had some sort of magic thing to them, or, some magical historical. This is it. This is the comment. Yes. So the noble savage trope. I'll just read this real quick. The noble savage trope was at its height, explaining the popularity of characters such as Tarzan, a human of noble birth, raised as a feral child and possessing thus an innate kindness and morality, which in theory he fails to find when he lives among civilized humans as an adult. So back to Vietnam. After having created the Prime Directive with the implication that technology was bad, that we had somehow eaten the forbidden fruit, yes, more damage from religion, and that our only decent course of action was to not force others to eat it too, thus ending their, quote, noble savagery, fall from grace. It was realized at some point that globalization was also one of the ideals that the series metaphorically wished to promote. And that is the theme that I'm going to be going for in season 1, is that Star Trek, the Federation, their policy is globalization, but on a galactic scale. And this is how they manage it. And that's why I'm starting with the Prime Directive, because the Prime Directive is, hey, how do we protect ourselves with globalization? And the next episode that I'm doing is on Q Who. And that episode is going to say, well, what happens when something that's more powerful than the Federation, who doesn't give a fuck about what the Prime Directive says, overrules the Prime Directive and pulls the Federation into a situation that it's not prepared for, which is, of course, when Q makes the Enterprise, brings the Enterprise to the Borg. That's what happens in Q. So the Vietnam is like TNG talks about Vietnam, and so do the movies a little bit. And TNG talks about the Cold War, and so do the movies a little bit. And then you move into DS9 when you had like the great 90s when everything was just kind of cool and chill and America was the great superpower and we didn't really have an enemy anymore. So we bought things and watched Friends all day. And so DS9 talked about religion, right?
Yep.
And then what Voyager was trying to do was say, our ideals are the greatest ideals that have ever existed in humanity. And I'm talking about United States American ideals. And if a group of us were thrown and cast away where we had no contact with the rest of the United States, if we held to our ideals that we believe in, we would be fine. And other cultures would change to match us because we're so great. And that's going to be one of the future seasons of the politics of Star Trek, is seeing if that's real.
Well, and a good comparison in that in Voyager was the two-parter Equinox.
Yes.
Because you have two Starfleet ships. Yes, they did set it up in such a way that the Equinox was a smaller, less capable ship, but you have one ship who stuck to their morals, and another ship that really bent them and even broke them in different circumstances. And you see that visual disparity between just the physical condition of the ships and the crew. And that is something that really, getting to criticism I had with Voyager is, yes, I understand the exploration episodic nature was definitely back to the heart of what Star Trek is at the at its core. Yes. They did stick to that, but they almost did it to a fault because they were so disconnected due to circumstances, and yet at the end of every episode or in that gap not shown on screen between episodes, a reset button was hit and the material condition of the ship was fine. The only time you had carryover were the two-parter episodes.
Well, and I think it's funny that the two characters on Voyager who had the most change, who actually had character arcs, both died. Kes and 7 of 9. And I think it's indicative of the series. Like, there were so few things that carried over. The Delta Flyer carried over from episode to episode. Tom and B'Elanna's relationship.
Yep.
Whatever the fuck it was. And then holodeck shit. And that was really the only things that carried on. And okay, and the Doctor did progress a little bit, but Voyager was like episodic television to the utmost. And if you can watch it for that, and I'm not one of those people that gets too hung up on nitpicky things. Like, I know Voyager lost like 30 shuttles or something. And so like everybody's like, what, was the ship made of shuttles? Like, where were they getting all of these?
And not just that, what about the torpedo count?
And the torpedoes, right. And I used to always find it so funny when they'd fight the Kazon and they'd be like, okay. And Janeway's like, okay, just fire a torpedo. And she would, and the ship would blow up. And I'm like, just build more fucking torpedoes. Like, why not do that? But apparently they're just incapable of building more torpedoes or something. 7 of 9 did die. She dies at the end. No, in Endgame, in the final episode, Admiral Janeway talks about how 7 of 9 died. She goes to her grave. 7 of 9 died.
But
that's one of the reasons she went back in time.
But that was in that timeline and not the timeline that ended up playing out in the end. And right. Again, this is why did they fucking use time travel so much? And
I don't know.
Not just that series, but others.
So talking about Endgame, I'm gonna promote myself one more time. I'm sorry, but I have a video on my channel of how Voyager should have ended. And so I heard this rumor, and I can't find any verification of it now, but when I was like 13, I heard this rumor that originally they were going to bring the crew back to Earth at the end of season 4. And Voyager was going to explore the aftermath of the Dominion War, which I thought was a great idea.
That would have been
Right?
How they would have done it, and because it was around that time they had just gotten 7 of 9 onto the crew as well.
Yes.
So you would have had her progression
Right.
there in Federation space, not see, and that's where, depending on how they would have gotten the ship back at that point, which I'm guessing probably would have been Q, which he had the fucking ability.
Well, so I wrote a fanfic when I was like 13 or 15 or something. I was a teenager, about how they would have got, like, if they'd done that, this is how they would have gotten home. And so I have a whole video about it, but I'll spoil it here for you. They get remember in the episode Timeless that they try the slipstream drive and they crash.
Yep.
So I get them home by Harry and Seven fixing the slipstream drive, and that gets them back to Earth at the end of season 4. So that's how I would have done it.
Okay. It's got to be better than this rewrite, this fan fiction that I'm putting into the live chat.
What
Jared,
is it?
we already covered it.
Oh.
What
Steve
is it?
Shives.
Yes. So it's Steve's video, and I mention him in my video because when I saw his video, that's what made me write my own. Because I like some of Steve's stuff, but I thought that one was terrible. And I was like, that is, if it was going to be rewritten today, that's kind of like how it is, because it becomes an arc. Like the last 3 seasons have an arc to them, and it's something you would binge watch and watch, for the complete story and stuff. I did not like what he wrote. I didn't think that it was very good. And I was like, I could do much better. So that's why I did mine. Even though mine sucks, I still think it's better than his.
Yeah.
I like some of his Star Trek stuff. I do.
And see, there are sometimes I agree with him on the Star Trek stuff, because I
understand where you guys are going.
It's just tough because there are other things. It's like,
I know,
Steve.
Listen.
Steve, how could you be so wrong on this topic?
I am also a progressive, just like Steve, but I am a different kind of liberal than I think most other people who are liberals are. Like, I don't care about sitting down. I mean, I had the Messenger reveals on my show, and I talked to the dude for an hour. Like, I can sit down and talk to anybody. And one of the things that Steve, I don't want to get too much into this, but one things that I don't like that Steve gets into all the time is, just ignore people you don't agree with, or, if you have them, if you talk to them
before you even talk to them.
Right. Like, he had this thing the other day. He's like, if you have someone on your live stream who is a white nationalist, you're supporting them. And I disagree. Like, white nationalists, like, fuck Nazis. Nazis are human garbage, and fuck Nazis. But at the same time, I will sit down and have a conversation with one for 2 reasons. First of all, maybe I'll change their mind. Second of all, how am I supposed to battle what they believe if I don't know what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I combat that?
And that's the thing. Not to sidetrack us all the way off on politics in and of itself. I don't have a problem with progressives like you. I have a problem with progressives that are like Steve. And the way I delineate them is I would call you more of a liberal than a progressive. Or I would call people like Steve regressive versus progressive.
Right. People, I think I am progressive because I'm in favor of universal health care. I'm in favor of UBI. Like, I think capitalism needs to transform into something new. I just don't think it's going to work in the future anymore, and we got to figure something out.
You don't like the Ferengi?
I support the Green New Deal. Like, I think it's a great idea, and we have to do it. Like, I'm progressive as fuck. I'm also a realist, and I know that if we do what the Green New Deal says we have to do, like, your 401k is going away. Like, it's going away. Like, we'd have a different type of economy. I don't know what it is. I just know that the world's on fire and we have to, like, do drastic shit to put the fire out.
Yeah, but at the same time, don't put in there that methane production from industrial farming.
Listen. We were going to get into this in our stream. Let's not spoil it right now. We'll do a whole. I promise you, 20 minutes on the Green New Deal when we talk. Promise. Let's talk about Voyager.
But yeah, so the two big things for me on why I appreciate it as part of the canon, but still rank it lower than others is that the overuse of the reset button due to episodic nature, given the environment they were in, and the lack of overall character development. I mean, come on. How many people do you know are still a fucking ensign after 7 years?
Listen, there are people who are, but they fucked up. You have to fuck up. Like, I'm not in the military. I don't have any close family who's in the military. But I know enough. Like, I was going to go into the Navy in college. Well, I explored going into the Navy in college, and they were like, well, you have to have a technical degree, and you're studying political science. So you're going to have to go to school for like 3 more years. And I was like, fuck this. No. So I know a little bit about it. Like, I know that there's pay grades and there's time and grade and everything. Like, to be an ensign after 7 years, like, you have to get some sort of demerit, or you have to have gotten you have to have been promoted and then demoted
multiple times. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, how could they do that to Harry? Yes, Harry made mistakes, but not on par with Tom.
Okay. No. Tom got his pip back. He in season 6 or 7, he walks out onto the bridge, and Janeway's like, "You're out of uniform, ensign." And there's poor or out of uniform lieutenant, and there's poor Harry Kim in the background, like looking at him with like tears, like streaming. Like, what do I have to do?
Here's my theory on that: is it goes all the way back. I want to say it's season 1 with the Deans. Mm-hmm. He's not their Harry. Therefore, they don't have to promote him.
Yeah, Harry Kim died. Yep.
So therefore, he doesn't have to be promoted.
One of my favorite moments that illustrates this is when they finally make contact in Pathfinder, in the episode of Pathfinder, and they talk to Admiral Paris for like 5 seconds, and Tom, who is late every fucking day, who fights being a nurse in sickbay, Janeway walks up and pats him on the shoulder, and she goes, "They're an exemplary crew." Like, no, Tom's a fuck up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, I want to find the quote. So, One Toad in the chat said, "You can't really promote everyone."
Right.
He was a military history guru and really fashioned Starfleet as pretty much the future Navy as the model going after. So when it comes to rank progression, the job done by an ensign, by a lieutenant JG, and by a full lieutenant, those 3 pay grades, the bottom 3 pay grades, like in the enlisted, the E1, E2, E3 pay grades on the enlisted side, pay grade doesn't fucking matter.
Right. Absolutely. And it wouldn't matter if everyone on the ship was a captain, because everyone could be a captain rank, but there's only one captain of the fucking ship.
Yep.
Just like if you go on the real Enterprise, there's an admiral and there's a captain, but the admiral runs the fucking ship. The captain is just a captain.
Actually, so carrier battle groups, there is an interesting play. The admiral that's on board controls the entire fleet. There's 3 captains, 06 ranks on the carrier. One is the commanding officer of the carrier itself, who is in charge of the carrier. The executive officer, the second in command, who typically ends up being the next commanding officer.
Right.
Both of those are 06s. But then you have the commander of the air group, the CAG. He is an 06, but his area of responsibility are all the squadrons. So you do have an interplay, and you do have a balance among where you have people of equivalent rank, but different responsibilities. If you want to stick in universe in Star Trek, look at the Enterprise A post. We'll ignore Star Trek V for right now. So when you look at the staffing of the Enterprise A in Star Trek VI prior to its decommission and everyone's retirement, Kirk is a captain. Spock retained his rank as a captain,
Yep.
which he got at the same time that Kirk was promoted to admiral. But
Yep.
also, Scott was a captain, but
Yep.
he was still the chief engineer. So again, you have three people of the same rank, but different tiers of responsibility.
Right.
And-
And so and that's what you said is exactly correct, obviously. I think it illustrates my point. Like, the captain of the vessel is different than a captain. And that's true in the real Navy too. Like, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, like a destroyer can be captained by a commander or something?
Destroyers, frigates, and fast attack submarines typically are
and ballistic missile submarines.
well, the boomers too are typically have a commanding officer who is a commander who is an O5, but when they hold the position as a commanding officer, they are still referred to as captain or skipper.
Right, absolutely. So that's what annoyed me. Like, I knew all of this as a kid watching Voyager, and it just annoyed me for Harry. Like, Harry, there's literally no reason why he shouldn't have been a lieutenant junior grade at the end of season 2. And definitely by the end of season 7, he should have been a full lieutenant.
Yeah, guy, fuck. She promoted Tuvok while they were in the Delta Quadrant.
Well, for what reason? Like, not that Tuvok didn't deserve it. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but it was like, is what Tuvok is doing for the ship so much better than what Harry does? Like, an operations officer runs the ship. Like, they don't run the personnel. I'm not saying they run the personnel, but they run the ship. Like, they make sure that there's fucking power where power needs to go. And like, everything, all of the operations for the entire ship was Harry's duty every goddamn day. And you didn't see people like having to shit out the windows or anything. So I think he did pretty fucking okay. Nobody showed up like, hey, Harry, I don't have pants right now. Can we have some more power in the replicators or something? Like, there's no reason why he shouldn't have gotten promoted.
No. So, from what I'm gathering of this segment of it, you recognize that, yes, Voyager had its warts, had its glaring warts and pimple scars and everything.
Sure.
But you also admitted at the beginning of this, the reason why you like it is because it's the series that you latched onto when you first entered the fandom.
I grew up with it. I was either 10 or 11 when it came out. I turned 10 in April of 95, which is when it launched, I think. It was 95 to 2001, right? Or 94.
90. Oh, hold on. I'll pull up.
No, it was 94 to 2001. So I was 9 when it came out. All right. But I literally grew up with it. Like, I literally became a teenager and a young adult almost as Voyager grew up.
Yeah,
so I just connected with it. But, TNG is everybody's favorite who's older than me, who's old hags like my sister. And, it had its warts too. You're going to tell me that Wesley Crusher is a more interesting character than Harry Kim? Go ahead and tell me that.
No. Ended up giving us the best present ever? Yes, because how many times in especially the first 3 seasons of TNG did you hear someone in some way say, "Shut up, Wesley," or
Absolutely.
"Shut up, kid"?
And if you watch my latest Star Trek Politics of Star Trek video, that trope is in there a little bit.
Oh, by the way, really quick, I gotta jump in. Jared, read LRJ88's comment. The one that says yes, Tuvok.
Yes, Tuvok had a point. 2 even to his ears.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
But even then, not just that. You must have seen the clip turned into Christmas Carol that someone did from TNG, Make It So.
I have not seen this.
You haven't seen it?
Jay, pull it up. You know
Please
what?
educate me.
Oh, yes.
Hold on.
Jay, pull it up. We have to share it with everyone.
Oh God,
It's the kind of thing that the world needs to witness, right?
Yes.
Do you remember which season it was?
No. Just do a search. Star Trek, Make It So, Christmas Carol.
Oh,
Yes.
that video. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, so I have missed this somehow.
You know, Vuntoad actually brings up a good question. Shall we talk about Farscape? Another episode,
because I know about Farscape and I've seen some of it, but I'm not as into Farscape as I am Star Trek, so I would not be a good person to explore that with.
Yeah, it's like me. I only have a cursory viewing of like Babylon
Firefly?
5. No,
no. Babylon 5. Right,
Babylon 5, yeah, which yes, Mama Murder knows it. All right, go ahead and play.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, make it so. Make it so. Make it so. Man, it doesn't show signs of stopping. And I brought me some tea Earl Grey hot. The lights turned way down low. Make it so. Make it so. Make it so. When we finally kiss goodnight. How I hate going out in the storm. But if you...
Really?
Shut up, Wesley.
Oh, sorry, I had to interject for some commentary there.
Oh,
No, that was great. That was exactly what we needed.
Yes, this. I forget when I first found this, but fucking rolling laughing when I found it. And
That is fantastic.
Oh, this is great. Let's keep going.
All the way home, I'll be
Warm. Oh, the fire is slowly dying. And my dear,
We're still goodbye, then. But
As long as you love me,
so,
make it so.
make it so. Make it so.
And that smirk from Wesley there at the end.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Let's see here. This copy of it's been out since 2015.
yeah. See, and that's the thing. You have a fandom who knows the series, even multiple of them, that well that they can end up stitching that together.
Mm-hmm.
Not because they hate it, but because they love it and they recognized, oh shit, we can make this happen.
Absolutely. I was just sitting there thinking, like, why didn't I think to do this? Brilliant.
Oh God. I have to interject with some Ghost Poo podcast there, Jared. Just
With some
this
what?
thumbnail, this thumbnail alone right here.
What the? Wow.
What? I miss. What is this?
So Irate Bear has a weekly podcast that he does that's called the Ghost Poo Podcast.
Uh-huh.
It's actually 3 times weekly. Him, Sinatra Says, and Drunken Uncle all take turns hosting it through the week, so that way because they all have their own channels that are monetized. This way they can all get donations and things like that.
Right.
And occasionally they do one-off episodes on the weekend. This one is Road Rage, Bad Drivers, Instant Karma.
Gotcha.
It's the fact that they're all riding like motorized scooters is great.
Right. Okay. That makes more sense. Now with the context, I understand. Thank you. I was going to ask you guys a question. Are you excited about Star Trek Picard?
Yes and no. I actually answered a survey on this on who was it, Kadwalski's community tab today.
Mhm.
It's, are you excited for Picard? Yes, no, I don't know, or yes, but I'm worried. And I'm in that yes, but I'm worried.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there is a cautiously optimistic option.
Right. You
Be-
know,
because some of the stuff that has been leaked out,
Mhm.
like the visuals, like from what I've seen of the uniforms, make sense, and I like them so far.
Sure.
Definitely got that
Mhm.
better and actually hit that check mark where Discovery didn't. But as for quality of the material and series itself is where I am most worried.
Sure.
Partly because they have had creative team issues the same way Discovery did and still does.
Mhm.
And also they had enough footage done to where they ended up doing some test screenings. And the results from those test screenings were far from desirable.
Right. I heard about that.
So while there's great potential to explore this new age of Starfleet and the Federation through the eyes of Picard, who has ties back to some of the golden age of the Federation, as it's been termed, which really can be seen as such.
Mhm.
But if the creative team is having issues like the Discovery creative team, I have very, very little faith in them providing a series of content that does the rest of the franchise justice.
So here's where I'm at with it. I agree with you on a couple of points. So Alex Kurtzman scares me. I don't trust Alex Kurtzman to prevent interesting stories. Well, no, let me say this differently.
Let's call them what they are, deviations.
So he comes up with interesting ideas, but he doesn't present them in a way that's interesting. I care about what happened to Picard, but he's also like an 80-year-old man. And like, I don't know that I like super care about what happens day to day for any 80-year-old man. Like, I just don't really care about and their daily lives. It's just not something that interests me that much. If what we're getting is, I like when Star Trek comments on current events. I think that's when Star Trek is at its best. When it is at its best in two instances. When it's either commenting on current events or when it treats itself as sci-fi horror. And when it's sci-fi horror that comments on current events, it's absolutely the best. If we're getting that, I'm in. I'm totally in. What I worry is that they're bringing him back to do too much social commentary, and that scares me because I do social commentary, and they have to be careful about trying too much to set a narrative because it's Picard and we have to set narratives, because that just gets boring. Mm-hmm. We have to have an interesting story that makes the social commentary. It can't just be social commentary.
Yeah, exactly. You have to weave it into the narrative of the episode, right. That's the thing that, for all the faults and warts of the first couple seasons of TNG, when they had their social commentary in there, it was not always beautifully, but it was worked into the story, right? Not as a blatant, hey, by the way, let me smack you with this.
Right.
Real quick for correction, some people wanted to compare Picard's lack of a promotion to Kim's. Here's the problem. People are forgetting the interaction that Picard had with Kirk in the Nexus.
Yes.
What was the advice that Kirk gave Picard?
Don't let them promote you. Don't let them do anything that gets you out of the chair, because while you're there, you can make a difference.
I fucking love that you got the quote exactly right.
I've seen that movie far too many times.
But
that is not a thing. You cannot see that movie too many times.
But that's exactly it. So Picard assumed command of the Stargazer because the actual captain had died during battle. So he retained command of that ship for the short time that he was still there on it. They don't really go into his postings between the Stargazer and the Enterprise D, but the Enterprise D is not his first command of a starship. And so when you get to that level, when you get to being what in the U.S. Navy is called a full bird captain, you don't... promotions always get slower the higher you go.
Right.
So when you factor in the advice he got from Kirk, a historical figure that he didn't openly idolize, but let's face it,
I mean,
if you were a captain of the ship named Enterprise,
right,
you knew what you had to live up to because of the history and the lineage that came with that position.
Absolutely. And if you figure he was 60 when he got posted, so he was 20 about 40 years after Kirk's adventures, dude.
Yeah, he grew up with him.
Was.
Yeah. Yeah. So factoring all that in, that advice from Kirk would have just been a haymaker on someone with a glass jaw. It just would have knocked him out and resonated the entire time.
Right.
So it's kind of like with Riker. How many times was Riker offered his own ship, but he refused it? Just during the series run of TNG.
Yep. Picard bitched him out in the Best of Both Worlds at the beginning. He's like,
why are you still here?
Why are you still here? And he's like, sir, they had that whole conversation. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think, and we know from the promotional material that he has retired for something happened and he retired. I think that he probably fell in love, and that his love or whatever, that was his love talking to him, his ex-wife, and he divorced her and left left Starfleet and has been living at his vineyard, and now like the Borg are back or something.
Yeah. I haven't
It's gonna
been
be the Borg. I'm telling you, it's going to be it's Alex Kurtzman. It is going to be the Borg. He hasn't gotten to do the Borg yet. He's going to do the Borg.
And and some people think that with the way towards the end, the latter half of season 2 of Discovery went, that's exactly what he was shaping it up to be with the Red Angel and the AI and all of that fucking stupid.
Yeah, I didn't. So if we're going to talk about the second part of Discovery season 2, there were things again that I liked. The whole control thing, that didn't need to be in. Like, you didn't need to have them fighting against control. They could have just been exploring these things that they were somehow seeing across the universe. And I have a theory about that, how they were actually able to see those. But you could have just been about that. It should have been just about that. Like, the whole control thing being bolted on felt like Alex Kurtzman going, well, I have this other idea too. How do we add in this? Because we have to have some excitement. We have to have some action to keep everybody watching. Where honestly, I watched in spite of that, not because because of it. It got in the fucking way.
Well, that's the thing. action for the sake of action in Star Trek never works.
No. Then you get William Frakes flailing around on a walkway trying to beat up the guy who mind raped Deanna in Nemesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was
That's just
terrible.
Again, another storyline that had such potential, but the execution was lacking, to say the least, and to be kind.
Yeah.
Nemesis. You don't like Ron Perlman?
Nemesis has a phenomenal premise. The Remans, who we've never heard of before, but they always existed. The Remans have somehow gotten Captain Picard's blood and used that to clone him. So they have amazing medical technology far beyond.
So the actual background there was it was the Tal Shiar that got the blood sample to make the clone. But once the Dominion War and everything happened there, and the Tal Shiar kind of died and then was resurrected, their plans with the Picard clone were done and gone. So they literally shipped him off to Remus, to the mines with the Remans.
Yep.
But because of his acumen, because of that genetic memory of Picard's from being a tactician and being the type of officer that he was, when the Romulan Empire joined in the Dominion War and they started using the Remans as part of their force, that's when Shinzon actually got notoriety. But then to go from a subjugated class to... They pretty much went really fucking fast from being slaves to being conscripts to taking over.
Right. And I need to issue a small correction. I said William Frakes instead of Jonathan Frakes or William Riker. Everyone in the chat just corrected me. Sorry about that. Yes, no, but you're absolutely on the nose correct. What I mean is that somehow the Remans ended up with the clone. That's what I was trying to say. I don't talk well. That's why I do live shows all the time. But my point is, we've never heard of these people before, but somehow they're super influential with Romulus, and they built a giant ship that's more technologically advanced than the Federation's most technologically advanced vessel, and they have this clone. Like, the premise of it is science fiction-y, and it's a cool premise, but it's not really a Star Trek premise.
Oh, well,
back to what I said a second ago, like, the Star Trek is at its best when it's sci-fi horror. It's not at its best when it's just sci-fi.
Well, and that's where it also depends on the generation of Trek that you're looking at, because one of the tropes that they used in Nemesis that really stood out to me, and not in a good way, was how the scimitar could fire while cloaked.
Right.
That was done before.
Yes. It was done by a Klingon ship in...
Six.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Star Trek. The bird of prey that Chang commanded.
Right. And it was kind of done... So I saw a whole argument by somebody on like a Star Trek message board one time that the Duras sisters were technically firing while cloaked because they were cloaking, firing, and recloaking, which... I wish I could remember where I saw it, but I think it was on StarTrek.com message boards like 1,000 years ago. But the point is that they tried to. We keep seeing this. We've seen this since Enterprise, that they keep presenting these ideas as brand new. Guys, there's 700 episodes of Star Trek. You aren't doing anything new. It's the same thing. Like, I haven't watched a bunch of the Orville, but I've read reviews on it. They have given up, like, even pretending that they're doing something new.
Oh,
they just take a Star Trek episode and rewrite it.
And here's the thing: Seth MacFarlane doesn't hide that fact either.
Sure.
He is a huge Star Trek fanboy, and that's where with Orville and Discovery starting at the same time, it really ended up being quite the comparison between the two. And this is why a lot of people who have watched both shows will say that the Orville is the spiritual successor to Star Trek, not Discovery.
Yep. And William Sines brings up a great question that deserves an answer, but I don't have it. Okay, in Generations, why didn't Riker start rotating the damn shield frequencies? I don't fucking know. I don't know.
Honestly, you have to give that up to bad writing. They did not want to
About
keep
300 yards.
Sorry.
they did not want to keep maintaining the Enterprise D model. So they actually wanted to get rid of the ship with the intent of in the next movie releasing a new one. So they had to somehow write out that ship. But the way they did it, holy fucking shit. You would think after dealing with the Borg that automatic frequency hopping of the shields would be already built in.
Sure, absolutely. Like, especially at a time when I remember it seemed like every single week we were rotating shield frequencies for fucking something, whether it was a tractor beam or a weapon. That was always the first thing. I mean, it's in Voyager every single week. Janeway tells Tuvok, "Well, rotate shield frequencies," and Tuvok's like, "Yeah, I'm already on it, lady." I wrote that code when I was laying in my bunk last night, so I can just sit here and stare at this fucking screen. So Berman is not a good writer, and he was never a good writer. Michael Piller is a good writer. Yep. And when you see good TNG episodes, probably Michael Piller wrote them.
Well, and that's another thing. The writing has really been the primary genesis of a lot of the criticism across the board. And actually, when they did the update and relaunch and did interviews with the cast for TNG, I went through and started watching some of those inter-season documentaries when they were talking to the cast. What I found interesting is during the run of the show, people started being critical about how certain characters were progressing and others weren't. And what it came down to, fucking Marina Sirtis admitted this herself. She was wondering, well, why isn't Troy getting more character development? And what it was, she ended up talking to Gates McFadden and Jonathan Frakes, and realized that the reason why her character wasn't progressing as much is because she wasn't interacting with the writing staff the way they were. Those other actors and characters had more influence on how the character actually progressed. They would get a script and be like, wait a minute, whoa, my character really wouldn't act this way. So they would go to the writing staff and have that powwow with them and get shit rewritten in a proper way. So it's not solely the writing staff to blame. It is the beginning of it, but it's also the actor actually taking ownership of their character that is a factor as well.
I agree with you, but I think that the fault lies at the feet of the showrunner, because
ultimately,
whoever is producing the show needs to have a vision for the show. And, the thing that we tend to love most whenever we watch a movie or whenever we watch a television show is the characters. And you can have, what's a great movie that, let's just talk about Seinfeld. Nothing really happens in most Seinfeld episodes, right? There's like 2 or 3 little plot points where the plot moves forward.
Were you listening to VTW last night?
I was there for a little bit of
Oh,
it, and then
you
I had
you
to leave.
you may have missed the crack. I actually compared it to where that show is for our community and the different topics that we cover. That show, I am not shying away from it. I will fully embrace this comparison. VTW, Veterans Talk Weekly, is the Seinfeld of
Oh
all
yeah,
of us because
I
it
did
is
hear
a
you say
show
that.
essentially about nothing.
Yes, I did hear you say that, and I agree with you. And I like VTW. I'm not saying I don't, but I absolutely agree. It's just about nothing. But it can be about nothing if the people who are in it are interesting, and they say interesting things, and they do interesting things. Your story can be stupid. Like, most action movies are some sort of revenge plot, right? Like somebody wants revenge.
Yeah.
Star Trek 6 is really just about getting revenge, right? I mean, that's really but it's probably the best Star Trek movie is Star Trek 6. I like Star Trek the motion picture, but it's not like any other of the Star Trek movies. It's really more like 2001 A Space Odyssey. So I
Yes.
don't really compare it to the other Trek movies, even though I really like it.
Well, so looking at it, I think you're confusing 2 with 6 because 2 had hints of vengeance, but not really. 2 was pure vengeance. It was Khan against Kirk, plain
Right.
and
No,
simple. But 6, it wasn't so much revenge as much as certain parts of the Klingon Empire and the Klingon hierarchy recognizing, oh shit, we're at an end. We need to conquest to survive.
thank you
And
for that, Jay.
which I already said, Jay, you're if you get that shirt, you are wearing it on camera.
Absolutely. You're going to twerk at that. No. What I'm saying is, Star Trek 2 is more of a revenge story. Absolutely. I'm saying nothing really happens in Star Trek 6. Like the guy gets assassinated and then they're looking into the murder, but that's really all that happens. I'm just saying the basic plot is a revenge plot, right? Like somebody wanted revenge and murdered him.
Well,
Now, obviously, it's not revenge. They're trying to change politics.
well, yeah, I would say it's more a political thriller in that aspect.
Sure. But I mean, I'm just talking about at a very basic level, it's about revenge. Somebody wants revenge against the Federation, and so they frame Kirk and everything.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is Star Trek 6 is a great movie because awesome, amazing things happen with lots of set pieces and lots of CGI, even though there's some great set pieces. And for the time, the CGI was pretty good, even though it's pink blood because they didn't want red blood because they thought it would get them a lower rating, and it probably did. But the point is, what's fascinating when we think about Star Trek 6 is Kirk and Spock standing there having that conversation across an empty table, and the framing of that conversation and the symbolism of them being on opposing sides. Yes, William, against the backdrop of the end of the Klingon Cold War. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the fall of the Klingon Empire. And, these are the interesting things. I mean, the Enterprise A bridge looks great. And Scotty says some witty shit. And so does McCoy. But it's the interactions between the characters that make it interesting. And Star Trek hasn't had that. Enterprise season 4 was better, right? But the first 3 seasons of Enterprise was all about, we have got this big grand story to tell you. And you can tell me a big grand story if it involves interesting people doing interesting things.
Yeah, and that's where Enterprise had potential with the time period that they went with of the precursor to the Federation and the dynamics that were going on between the humans and the Vulcans and the humans' first real foray into the galactic community. And again, had they done it more like DS9 did, where you have that overarching menace in the background going on later in the series run, not at the beginning, that
Right.
would have been a better play. But I think they were they were deluded in thinking what made DS9 successful was those later seasons with the threat of the Dominion and having that overarching story. The thing is, if you actually look at it, from the time of the Dominion's introduction, they were always a simmering threat in the background, but they didn't start having consecutive episodes about it until season 6.
Right. Yep. And, you know, one of the reasons why DS9 worked was, like, I remember when they said they were coming out with DS9, I was like, okay, so it's going to be like Babylon 5. I remember my sister being like mad that Star Trek was just going to do Babylon 5.
DS9
so
started a year before.
Right. I'm probably just parroting what she told me.
Yeah.
8. But what was great about it was you had like a former terrorist is the first officer. And while it was interesting to see a black captain, what was cool about Cisco was that he didn't want to be there. And that would have been interesting if he was white or yellow or polka dotted or blue or whatever.
It was that dynamic that he didn't want to be there. And also with the timing and the way they set it up, and you have that cross in The Emissary where you have touches of TNG and the true beginnings of DS9.
Yes.
But that dynamic, that meeting in the conference room behind the bridge between Picard and Cisco.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Because everything is perfectly lit and they've got that Captain Picard light on Patrick Stewart and he's sitting there all Captain Picard lit, and the camera switches to Ben Sisko looking at Picard like he wants to rip his fucking throat out and shove it down his goddamn neck. And fuck you. You killed my wife, you motherfucker, and you can go fuck yourself. And why don't you engage your starship up your ass? And then walks. I think that was the dialogue. Like, I don't remember specifically what he said, but it was along those lines.
Yeah.
And then he walks out.
Yeah. And it wasn't until it wasn't until Cisco really got to interact with both the wormhole aliens known as the Prophets, and then getting to understand what Bajor had to deal with and everything, that he realized, no, this is the place that I need to be right now. Not just for them, but for me.
And the only character in Voyager, well, okay, so there are 2 characters in Voyager that had that level of interest for me. 7 of 9 and the Doctor.
Oh, you mean a couple of the characters who actually had progression?
Right. And that's it. And like, I'm going to say it again. I love Voyager. I can sit down and watch any episode of Voyager except for, oh shit, what's it called? Fuck.
Threshold?
The one about the space elevator. The Rise?
Oh, okay, yeah.
God, it's terrible. It's the acting is bad.
It's a freaking Neelix episode.
Like, literally, like, you can see the director just shaking the camera at one point. Anyway, that's the only episode that, for me, is literally unwatchable. Like, Voyager has a lot of episodes that are watchable, but it has very few episodes that are great. Like, The Year of Hell is great. And why is The Year of Hell great? Because the villain is super fucking interesting. He's a great character.
And also played by a great actor.
Well, yes, of course. But that I recognize those things about Voyager. I see its warts. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to sit down and watch the pilot episodes of all Star Treks, and I mean all I'm including Enterprise and Discovery in this, the Voyager pilot is the best pilot. Hands down. Fight me. Broken Bow is shit. Broken Bow is a bad.
Yeah, no, I'm not arguing that one.
No, I wasn't going to go Broken Bow, but it, again, is one of those.
The Emissary is not bad.
I was going to say that is the one that I would pit against it.
It's not bad, but the Voyager pilot because all of the characters in it are really, really interesting. Like she goes and she meets Tom Paris, who's in prison, and she is going to bring a criminal onto her crew. That's interesting. And then you go, well, what did he do? And why does he look like Wesley Crusher's friend? In the only episode of TNG
they should have kept that name.
You know why they didn't? They didn't because the writer would have gotten a royalty credit because the writer named him for that TNG episode, and it was literally just a money move.
That's just fucked up.
That's why they changed his name. What was his name? Nick Locarno.
Locarno, yeah.
Right. Nick Locarno.
And, you know, that would have made for some great continuity across the multiple series because you could see Locarno having an issue after that incident.
Sure. Absolutely. Like, it would be so interesting if Nick Locarno got kicked out of Starfleet Academy and went and joined the Maquis and was in the Maquis for like 2 years. Or 3 years. I think it was 3 years at that point.
And correction to the chat. Sisko was promoted to captain aboard DS9 and was actually given the pip by Eddington.
Right.
It was
Mick McConnell. That's funny, ST. Sorry.
I'm trying to remember if that was it was before the Dominion War, after the Klingon War.
It's the first episode of season 3. No.
4 or 5.
No, season 4. Yeah. And then Eddington, of course, turns out to be Maquis.
It goes to Maquis and
Right.
Which that was an interesting choice of going with Javert and that I loved that episode. So I am not into Les Mis. Like I'm not one of those people that's like, Les Mis is the greatest thing ever. I find it boring. But I loved the reference. I think too, right as I'd seen that episode, like I'd read it that year at school or something. So it was like or maybe we'd watched it. I don't know, but I had just been exposed to Les Mis for like the first time when that episode aired. And so I just thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, he's talking about the thing. Because of course I'm like 10, but no, I loved that they pulled that trope into it. I wish, because that's the kind of thing that's interesting. And it would have been interesting had they brought that into the episode earlier and not been so rushed with it through the latter half of the episode. Right.
And isn't that the episode 2 where they have the holo communicator for the first time?
Yes.
Right. So I want to say something about that with Discovery. Like, everyone's all up in arms. They're like, they didn't have holo communicator. Who gives a fuck? Like, I don't care about little things like that. Like the little continuity, like, oh, we're going back in time. And yeah, we always had those. Like, none of that bothered me.
So here is my understanding of it is that what we see as the view screen, you can even see it with the way they kind of play it in TNG. The view screen itself was actually a 3D image.
Right.
So you had that technology in that fashion. It's just in Discovery, throwing it back to where they have it, they use it, but there were captains out there who didn't like it and wanted it removed. Back when captains had a little more leniency and a little more freedom in how their ship was run, it would make sense why, hey, we're putting this out there, but then a lot of captains going, no, fuck that shit, and get rid of it.
I agree with you. So it's been something, so I'm going to get super nerdy here for a second. It's always annoyed me. I always used to think about this when I was a kid, is how does like the camera know? Because you'll see the captain will walk across the bridge, or they'll be, like in the conference room and they'll be sitting in one chair one week and another chair another week, but the camera, whatever, can still see them. So in my head, I would just think, okay, well, it's some kind of holographic sensor. I don't even know what you would call it, because it's the only thing that makes sense is that like the computer AI like knows where you are and can like aim the camera at you, and it knows when to zoom in and zoom out, and it knows when like you're talking with your crew or are you just talking. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, and yeah, and there are times where just go into TNG, and when Picard is talking to someone through the view screen, you can. It's not always, but you can definitely tell when it's important that the delineation being known that okay, we're going to talk about something that the other side doesn't need to hear. He will gesture or give a look,
Right,
and they'll pretty much mute the feed.
right. Yeah.
But then it kind of makes you wonder, do they do anything with the visual bit?
So I've been thinking about this too, like in my head. Like in my head, what would always happen is what they're seeing is like, you know, when you get the pixelated thing over somebody's mouth when they say fuck, like they pixelize out just the mouth.
Yeah.
That's what I've always envisioned in my head is like, well, couldn't they just read their lips? Like their universal translator is only advanced enough like to read auditory input.
Yeah, and that's where there must be something along those lines that's going on.
Right. There would have to be, or it was just a TV show and we're overthinking it, which is also
overthinking. Yeah. See, that is a common thing about any fandom.
Of course.
That deep analysis and that what ifs is just, it's par for the course.
Dude, you're talking to somebody who has a 27-minute long video on his YouTube channel about rewriting the last episode of a TV series that has been off the air for almost 2 decades. Okay.
Fuck, it has been that long.
Yeah, it has. And I found the episode you're talking about with the Neelix and the elevator, the space elevator. It's called Rise in season 3, episode 19.
It is called Rise. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I did have that right. Yeah. That one is the only one that's unwatchable for me.
And it being a Neelix episode doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, like I'm not somebody that hates Neelix. I know a lot of people fucking hate Neelix, and probably because his name is Ethan and my name is Ethan, so I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Well, I think part of it is the way his character and the mannerisms get to be a bit much.
Somebody called him one time Star Banks, and I think that's fucking fun.
The way I looked at Neelix is he's a cross between Guinan and Quark. He provides the necessary check,
Right.
but at the same time knows how to get things like Quark does, at least early on.
Yeah, I mean, and I wish that they had made more of that. I mean, basically, he's a thief and a liar when they meet him, and then he turns into like everybody's best friend by the end. So they just kind of ignore some stuff about his character. It's not even really character progression. In fact, I remember in the second to last episode of Voyager when he's like, "Yeah, I'll take my ship." I'm like, "Oh fuck, his ship has been sitting there like
the entire fucking time."
Yeah,
the whole series. Like he never got in his. Oh, he's Snarf. Yes, Mama Murder. He is Snarf. Snarf Binks. But like he never got in his ship. They're fighting the Kazon, and Janeway was never like, "Hey, listen, can you like go shoot some of them for us?" Like that never happened once.
and yet they had to build the Delta Flyer twice.
Tom Paris. Okay, I'm going to tell you something about Tom Paris. Tom Paris not only designed, not only built, not only fabricated an advanced starship 70,000 years away from any resources required to do so, he did it twice. Okay? Ray is not a Mary Sue. Tom Paris is a Mary Sue. The end. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
You know, I would argue both are just in different ways.
Ray was a Mary Sue in Force Awakens, but she's not a Mary Sue in The Last Jedi, which is a terrible fucking film and just fuck it. But she's not a Mary Sue because no one in that movie is a Mary Sue because they all just fuck everything up and nothing works and everyone are just fuck ups except for Kylo Ren, who chops Snoke in half. He's the only one who's not a Mary, who could be a Mary Sue in that film.
So the one episode that I have an issue with in Voyager is Author in season 7. That's the one where basically they redo the whole trial of Data, but for the Doctor.
Right. Yes. So I like that episode because of its social commentary, because it's a thing that our society still hasn't figured out, that everybody is equal and everyone just deserves equality. And like, we should all just stop cutting people out of humanity. Like everyone.
No, I understand that. I think what a lot of what I have issue with it is that they were trying to hide it as a whole new trial with just barely a reference to the Measure of a Man episode.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing is, with the time gap between when Measure of a Man took place and when they left and got trapped in the Delta Quadrant, Janeway would have fucking known about that.
Yeah, it was like 14 years or something. I mean, it was over a decade. I know that much.
Yeah, so it's a question of, if Data was not determined to be property during that, why is it even a question with the Doctor? Because
so, here's how I would make the argument, and I'm going to do a politics of Star Trek on this at some point, like a year from now, in like season 4. The difference is that you can see Data and you can touch Data, but the Doctor is really just code inside code. Like, the Doctor is a function inside Voyager's program.
But at the same time, a hologram can present as a solid object, and he has the autonomous control to change that aspect of himself as he determines fit. Otherwise, how would he be able to interact with the instruments needed to perform his primary duty as the medical officer?
Right. And here's what I was going to say. They didn't present this right in the episode. But the difference is that Data is a physical automaton, and the Doctor is code that can be copied. Like, you can't copy Data. You can't, like, say, hey, replicator, replicate me a Data, and you'll get a Data. You would get another android.
Yeah, he tried with LOL.
Right. It didn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue it didn't work with Lore either. Like, Lore is a fucked up version of Data that didn't work.
He was too Noonien Sung was too good with that version.
Right. I guess really you would say that Data is a fucked up version of Lore that did work. Actually, I guess would be the right way to say that. But and I think that's the problem that they didn't illustrate in the episode, and I would have, is that you could make infinite copies of the Doctor. I mean, we see it at the end of the episode, like all those.
Oh yeah, all the Mark I's working.
Mark I's. Yeah, working in the dilithium mine.
Oh, Pheno, but the Doctor is Data.
No, but you're correct. He is Data, and I think that's the issue: is that the Doctor is just bits, quadrillions of them. No, it would be more than that. I don't even know how many
quintillions. He that's the thing is. The staggering amount of data, and that's where when the EMH was taken from Voyager and they tried to rebuild them from scratch, they had such a hard time because of the massive amount of data that was required for his program to function.
Well, and remember what is it that Andy Dick plays? The Mark IV?
2.
Oh, was he only a Mark II? Oh, okay. I thought
he was the Mark II and in DS9 they were looking at using Bashir as the template for the LMH, the long term.
Right. Okay. I thought he was a Mark IV for some reason. But what they had to do, apparently, he had to scrap the entire program, and Zimmerman had to rewrite from scratch or something, because the EMH Mark I was so faulty, and they should have, if they had mentioned that in the episode, it would have become a far better episode. and they didn't. They just redid Measure of a Man, which
Yeah.
it was Living Witness is a fine episode. I mean, it's not bad. It's just not as good as Measure of a Man.
Yeah. Again, when you have people who pay attention to some semblance of continuity, you end up not missing details like this.
Well,
Right.
Let me have a little counter here to your thoughts on the Doctor being copyable and everything.
Sure.
They allowed the Doctor to grow as a program.
Right.
They allowed him to change. Now, yes, you could in theory copy that, but the one thing that makes the Doctor a little bit more like Data is his mobile emitter. They can't just duplicate that.
Sure. No, I totally agree with you. And that's where my frustration for the episode comes, is they didn't bring up any of that. Because you're absolutely right. And that's the smallest jump of logic to say why we need to have a new trial. And they brought up none of it.
Yeah. What that actually shows me is the team who wrote the episode in Voyager had no background knowledge of the issue that had already been addressed in the other series, or else they should have found a way to, one, provide better argumentation on both sides of the question as it pertained to the Doctor, but also have those references to where one side tries to use that prior case with Data as precedent, but then the arbiter will be like, no, here's this reason why that case does not apply. And there's your fucking reference.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I have to interrupt for something real quick, because I just got a notification that I just hit 200 subscribers on YouTube.
Nice.
So I'm guessing that has to do with your audience, and if so, thank you very much for that. That is awesome. But go on.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is, you don't have to go into elaborate detail with the references. It very much could have just been 3 to 4 short lines of dialogue during the initial argumentation of, well, we present the findings from this case to be precedent for our position on why the Doctor is to be treated as a sentient being. And then the arbiter or the adjudicator acknowledging, okay, however, there are these crucial differences. As such, it cannot be accepted. You have your reference to the prior case. They've done it, and it is appropriate and applicable and proper given the circumstance.
Yes. And I want to illustrate something Ugly German Truths is saying in the chat, because I agree completely. He says, well, I can see how the specific Voyager Doctor is not replicable. You could copy the firmware, I guess, but the personality, the experience, data banks, it could be easily construed that those are just too massive for copies. So even a beamed over or copied Doctor would not be the Doctor. And I absolutely agree with you. My frustration is that they didn't bring any of that up in the episode, and it's so fucking plain to see.
Yeah.
Like, that should have been in the episode. Right. It's author, not living witness. Yes, You're right. I'm sorry, William. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, Living Witness was the one that took place decades after Voyager apparently was part of some... Yeah.
That was when they crashed to the... That was with the slipstream drive.
No, it wasn't.
No. Living Witness was the one where...
Season 4, episode 23.
Yep, it was the... they came across a planet with two warring parties. They hosted one, got attacked by the other.
Oh, yes. Yeah. They're the ones that I bring up in my terrible Voyager fanfic video. I'm thinking of it starts with an F. What is the name of that episode?
I can't.
Oh, no. Living Witness is the Kyrians. I'm thinking of the guys with the shit. They were put to sleep like 10,000 years before, and they accidentally find their conduits, but the Hirogen...
Oh, that is. Hold on, just a
Um,
second here.
oh
That
shit!
is season 5 or 6, if I remember correctly. It's the
I think
I want
it's
Dragon's Tooth.
Timeless is what I'm thinking of, not Living Witness. Timeless
Timeless is the slipstream one.
Timeless
Where
was the slipstream.
is the Slipstream, and then the other one is
I want to say I just saw. I want to say it's the Dragon's Tooth is what
the
you're thinking
Dragon's
of.
Tooth. Yes, which I think is season 5.
No, just
No, 6.
right here, Dragon's Teeth.
Oh, is it season 6?
Yeah, Voyager's pulled into subspace corridor, traveling 200 light years, but pushed out by the Turi.
Yes, the good
And
old
then 900 years ago, the population. Yeah,
and the Vaudouar. See,
Yeah.
and that was such an interesting trope. The Vaudouar and the Teray, like that they were these old people that had like that's why when people say in the future, like there's nothing to do with Star Trek. Like, what do you do next with Star Trek? Like, here is an amazing, awesome villain, the Vaudouar, that have a great idea about them that was pretty unique actually in Voyager that could come back and ravage the Federation with their network.
Yeah, and that's where Star Trek Online tried to do something with it when they. Is that Naomi Wildman now?
Wow. Well,
yeah,
probably not her now, but that was her point.
No, that is a newer picture of her because.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah. Oh, damn!
she grew up.
She's about as old as my wife.
Really?
Within days.
Oh, she was born in 1988. She's 3 years younger than me.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is. I will have to say, I recognize why you've latched on to Voyager now, but I'm glad you're not doing it in such a way that you ignore the errors and the flaws. Because that's the thing is, you like it and you enjoy it. You've held on to it despite those.
Sure. You know what? I'm going to. I'll say something here as a progressive. A lot of my progressive peoples have latched on to Discovery because it's very progressive, right? There's a lot of diversity in the cast and stuff. And I think a lot of people who are progressive overemphasize how good Discovery is because it's so progressive. And I won't do that. I don't hate Discovery. It's not bad television. It's not great television. And a lot of times it's not good television. But it's not bad television most of the time. There's some stuff in it that's just straight up bad. Like Control is just a bad idea. But I'm not a person that's going to just like something because its agenda is one that I like or care for. Even if I like or care for those things inside of it, I can also look at it as a whole and say, yeah, some of this just isn't that good.
Yeah. Well, and that's been my thing is I had expectations based off of what CBS reported it was going to be.
Right.
And they failed to meet those expectations.
Yes.
And that put it at a disadvantage from my viewpoint. And then the way the series and the writing and the way it's been disjointed and disconnected through the first season. And yes, it got better and closer to actual Trek for the first part of the second season, but then went off the rails again at the end of the second season.
Yeah.
It just...
Yeah. Well, I'm still stuck in the middle of the first season, so yeah.
Well, and they're trying to... I'm not going to spoil anything for everybody. But they make... something happens at the end of season 2 so that Discovery fits into the continuity. So it's not weird that Discovery is never mentioned or anything. I'm not going to spoil that for anybody that hasn't seen it. I will be doing a full review on my channel at some point. Before season 3 airs, I'll do a full thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, give it like a week or two before season 3 airs,
Probably.
whenever that is.
Well, I'll probably do it like a month before because people will actually be like, if I did it now, no one's fucking looking for it. So it'd be a waste of time. But I'll have it up probably a month before the new season comes out. The issues with Discovery are with its writing and with its lack of characters. Like, it is difficult for me to remember characters who aren't Michael Burnham, to remember their names. I mean, not Christopher Pike, obviously.
Yeah, well, yeah, Pike was a character before Discovery, and I think that's what they were banking on, was getting everything. And that's where, you know, had they gone to the Enterprise and centered it around the time when Pike or April were in command, that would have been better than what we got. Absolutely.
And the new aesthetic doesn't bother me. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, it doesn't look like the 60s anymore. Yeah, because it's not the fucking 1960s anymore.
So here's my take on that is, if you were going to do a visual reboot, say so from the beginning. Mm-hmm. That is my criticism, not towards the series, but towards CBS in general. Right. If you're going to say that it fits perfectly without issue in the continuity right before TOS, then they needed to put the effort into the entire series that they did with the In a Mirror Darkly in Enterprise and the flashback to Trouble with Tribbles in DS9.
Yep, absolutely.
If they were going to say that, you needed to put that level of energy into keeping the visual aesthetic as well. Had they said, yes, it's taking place in this time frame, but we are doing a visual reboot, you know what? Half of the criticism is gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say 3/4 of the criticism would be gone at that point.
Oh, no, because a lot of the criticism for me personally is the writing and the handling of the series beyond that.
Right. And again, like, it kind of hurts me as a progressive because I want to see gay people more accepted in media. Like, I am a fan of them being presented as normal people because they are normal people.
Yep.
And so like, when Star Trek does that, I'm like, absolutely, you know, Star Trek, my favorite thing in the world. It's doing the thing that I like. But when then I have to sit there and watch the episode and it's not written well and the characters aren't that interesting and don't do interesting things, I just put my head in my hands and go, well, then why the fuck include them? Because now you're just annoying me as a fan of Star Trek.
Yeah. But feels like we could go on for another almost 2 hours talking
we
about
probably
this.
could.
So, but you're going to come on my channel and we're going to talk about politics stuff.
Yep.
And we'll call each other fuckheads and we can get like little Nerf guns and shoot them at each other and stuff. So it'll be real therapeutic. So that'll look a pig kinky. Yeah.
Well, and even then, I like the premise that we go with, because looking at the 2020 election season, I am trying to give all the candidates a fair shake and figure out where I should consider throwing my support, and I'm having a difficult time with it. And that's where on your channel, we'll start it with where I'll lay out where my personal ideologies stand.
Okay.
And hopefully that will also explain why I have a difficult time finding a candidate worth supporting from either side to begin with.
Sure. No, and I love that idea because as a political scientist, I think that it's an awful, awful fucking idea to have like 24 candidates. I just think that's a bad idea. But as a politics nerd, this is like Christmas because I get to look at all
there are so many options.
Right, absolutely. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, that is one thing that could do this thing. So, you know, I don't think we'll go through all of them. I mean, you know, like Andrew Yang, who gives a fuck, even though I just did a video on Andrew Yang, but it's because he was talking about atheism. It's not because Andrew Yang, like Andrew Yang. But like Andrew Yang, we won't talk. Marianne Williamson, she's not going to come up. You know, we'll probably center on 5 or 6 at the top. And then I have a toddler trying to come into the room right now. So I do have, hi, sweetheart.
Hey, you have the kid coming in to annoy you. I have the dogs looking for their dinner already.
She's literally, so the room that I'm in has a cat door.
Mm.
And so the cat's eating here. So she's literally right now reaching through the cat door and feeding the cat piece by piece.
Oh, gotta love kids.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to go.
So, last point from LRJ88. Do you have to point out that someone is gay for them to be gay? No. And that is the beauty of it. When it wasn't the series, it wasn't Discovery itself that made the homosexual relationship be a huge thing.
Right.
It really was more of a side piece and led into why the characters have the interactions that they do. It really was people who were being critical of it throwing that as the cherry on top of, oh, look at all this shit they're trying to throw in your face. And it's like, and I even said it, no, they're really not trying to throw the homosexual thing in your face. You're just being an asshat.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like, they're just two people that are in a relationship, which is how it should, like, that's real life. Like,
Yeah.
people
So-
get into relationships with people of the same gender or no gender.
Yeah. Well, it was
it's that they didn't write it.
Yeah, it's like even in Star Trek Beyond when they used Sulu as
Right.
as an homage to George Takei, who is
Right.
homosexual. They made Sulu homosexual in that version, and again, it was very in passing. It's like, oh, they just watch him, and he meets up with someone who has a couple kids, and oh wait, that's his family.
Right.
It,
and he
it wasn't a huge thing.
Right. He gives his partner, husband, I don't know what, but he gives him a kiss. It's like, okay, well, hey, how's it go? I mean, it was perfectly presented. Like, that's how it should be presented. What my criticism is that Discovery it pushes things a little hard sometimes. Things that I like and want to see accepted in media, but I don't want to see pushed too hard because they don't need to be pushed too hard. They just need to be there, like in real life.
And unfortunately, Techatron has a point here. To some people, a homosexual existing in public is, quote, throwing it in their face.
That's true, Tech. That is absolutely true.
Well, which is why I say the people who complained about that relationship being part of the dynamics within the crew, again, that person is an asshat.
Right.
And,
yes, they are.
And again, like the Orville has the Mocklans, who are an entire species that is homosexual, but also has the weird dynamics that they also end up playing in, which is also tie into TNG and the aforementioned episode between Riker and Soren. And again, when you have a Star Trek nerd with free reign to write his own show as essentially a Star Trek parody, this is what you get. And
Exactly.
I love it.
I like what I've seen at the Orville. I haven't seen the end. No, I saw the end of season 1. I haven't seen any of season 2 yet. I just need to sit down and watch it at some point.
You should. It is, in my opinion, it has been very well done, and just watch it. I'm not going to say anything beyond that. And with that, we have come towards the end of our time slot for this episode of Kanar with Damar, and you know what, guys? With the interaction with the live chat and everything, I am going to go ahead and make sure that the normal cast gets together within the next 2 weeks and start discussing the potential of doing this twice a month starting in August.
I think that's an awesome idea.
So look forward to hearing more from that. Of course, channel announcements that I have as they come up do get announced on the other shows that the regular show on VTW that I do. But also, if you're not already subscribed, go to AT2 Moto, subscribe there as well. I have been a little insanely busy recently, so I haven't gotten the last couple rides worth of footage out also at the same time because of a bunch of shit going on in the background. I'll admit, I haven't really wanted to talk about much during my rides because going for a ride has been a bit of my peace and quiet away from the annoyances that go on in the background that some may or may not be aware of. So hopefully all that starts calming down so we can actually start talking about more topics, which, you know what? For those of you who are fans and watching over there, let me know in the comments or direct messaging any other way. Do you enjoy the borderline self-help nature that the motovlogs themselves have been taking, and would you like to see that continue, or what types of topics would you enjoy hearing my take on as I ride around my new digs in the wonderful scenic area that is Newport, Rhode Island? But until then, I have
Well, I
been...
just want to say that was a toddler screaming in the background, if you didn't hear that. But I want to say thank you very much for having me on. This was awesome, and I really appreciate you.
And I completely enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it
Look
too.
forward to the next one as well, and look forward to scheduling that discussion on your channel there, Ethan.
Absolutely.
So, with that, any parting thoughts?
No.
Jay?
No, I ain't got nothing right now.
All right.
I'm going to go see the new Spider-Man tonight. That's my parting thought for you. Still haven't seen it, so I'm going to go see it tonight.
Well, you enjoy.
Okay.
Until then, everyone else, have a safe rest of your weekend, and we will see you on the next stream.
Bye, everybody.